I set 5 place settings at Christmas dinner. 1 for me, 4 for ghosts. My husband and 3 sons died in a plane crash 9 years ago today. Tonight, I finally understood why I've been setting their places every Christmas since. The answer destroyed me. Don't miss a single beat of this story. Subscribe, like, share with someone who loves gripping stories, and drop your thoughts below. My 10 p.m. stories, one story every night at 10 p.m. This is about the moment when grief stops being something you carry and becomes something you perform. A ritual so polished it feels like love, until you realize it's just fear dressed up as devotion. I'm Seta Samson. I'm 62 years old. I've been married 3 times, divorced twice, and widowed once. Tonight, on the 9th anniversary of the crash that took everything, I'm finally ready to tell the truth about what I've been doing at this table. I woke at dawn on Christmas morning, the way I had for 9 years. The house was silent except for the furnace clicking on, pushing warm air through vents that served only me. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, feeling the familiar weight settle over my chest. Anticipation mixed with dread, like waiting for surgery you've scheduled yourself. By 7, I was in the kitchen. The turkey, a 12-pounder, too much for one person, went into the oven. I made Tom's favorite cranberry sauce from scratch, the recipe his mother had given me 23 years ago in London. I prepared roasted vegetables the way my middle son, David, liked them, with extra olive oil and rosemary. I made mashed potatoes for Marcus, my oldest, who'd put butter on everything. For Jamie, my youngest, I baked his beloved apple crumble, even though he'd only been 13 when he died, and his tastes might have changed. The cooking took hours. I moved through the kitchen like a dancer performing choreography I'd memorized, each movement precise and automatic. Peel, chop, stir, season. My hands knew what to do, even when my mind drifted, which it often did these days, floating between past and present like a ghost haunting my own life. By 2 in the afternoon, everything was ready. The dining room table was set with 5 places. The good china, the silver cutlery Tom and I had received as a wedding gift, cloth napkins folded into neat triangles. At the head of the table sat Tom. To his right, Marcus. To his left, David. Next to David, Jamie. And at the far end, facing Tom across the expanse of polished wood, sat my chair. I stood in the doorway, surveying my work, and felt that familiar flutter in my chest. Not quite happiness, not quite pain, something in between that I'd stopped trying to name years ago. While the turkey rested, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in the living room, waiting. That's what I always did. Cooked, set the table, then waited. As if by preparing everything perfectly, I could summon them back. As if grief worked on the same principle as hospitality. Set the table and they will come. My mind drifted, the way it always did during the waiting. I thought about my first marriage, Khalid, the Kuwaiti student I'd met at UCLA when I was 22. He'd been brilliant, ambitious, and completely wrong for me. We'd married at 23 in a ceremony that pleased his family and confused mine, and divorced within a year when we both realized that passion isn't the same as compatibility. I remembered sitting in a lawyer's office in Los Angeles, signing dissolution papers, thinking my life was over. I was 24 and already a divorcee. My mother had been devastated. My father had been quietly relieved. I'd been empty. Not heartbroken, just empty. Like I'd tried on a life that didn't fit and now had to return it. I'd thrown myself into my master's degree after that, buried myself in research, convinced that love was something I wasn't good at, that maybe I was meant to be alone. Then I met Johan at a conference in San Francisco, a South African IT expert with gentle eyes and a laugh that made me feel safe. That marriage lasted 3 years, longer than the first, but not long enough. He'd wanted children immediately. I wanted to finish my PhD. He'd wanted to move back to Cape Town. I'd wanted to stay in California. We loved each other, but we'd wanted different lives, and eventually, wanting different things is the same as not loving each other at all. I was 30 when we divorced, twice failed at marriage, and beginning to think I was fundamentally broken in some way I couldn't fix. I met Tom when I was 33. He was British, a businessman with interests in renewable energy, and he was in California for a conference. We met at a hotel bar. Such a cliche, but sometimes cliches happen because they're true. He was funny, warm, unpretentious despite his success. He asked about my research with genuine interest. He made me laugh so hard I snorted wine through my nose. We dated long distance for 6 months, him flying from London, me flying from Los Angeles, both of us racking up frequent flyer miles and international phone bills that made our friends think we were insane. Then he asked me to marry him, and I said yes without hesitation, without the doubts that had plagued my previous marriages, without anything except the certainty that I'd finally found someone who fit. I moved to London, left my position at UCLA, found work at Imperial College, started over in a new country with a man I barely knew but somehow understood completely. It was terrifying and exhilarating, and right in a way nothing else had ever been. We had Marcus 9 months after the wedding. David came 2 years later. Jamie surprised us when I was 41, an unexpected blessing when we thought we were done. Tom was an incredible father, patient, silly, present in a way my own father had never been. He coached soccer teams and helped with homework and made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs every Sunday morning. For 20 years, I had the life I'd stopped believing was possible. A marriage that worked, children who thrived, a career I loved, a home filled with noise and laughter, and the beautiful chaos of a family that functioned. And then, on December 25th, 9 years ago, it all ended in a way so sudden and complete, it felt like God had reached down and erased everything good from my life in a single stroke. They were supposed to go to Dubai for the holiday. Tom had business meetings scheduled and he'd decided to turn it into a family vacation. Christmas in the desert, swimming pools and luxury hotels. A break from London's gray winter. I was supposed to go with them. But I had my PhD thesis defense scheduled for January. I was behind on revisions, stressed about my dissertation committee, consumed by academic pressure that felt life or death important at the time. Tom had urged me to come anyway, said the work could wait, said family was more important. The boys had begged me to join them. I'd kiss them goodbye at the door, distracted, already thinking about the chapter I needed to rewrite. Marcus was 20, home from university for the holidays. David was 18, applying to colleges. Jamie was 13, all legs and braces and excitement about flying first class. Tom had hugged me and whispered, "I'll miss you." And I'd patted his back absently and said, "Have fun, bring me back something nice." Those were my last words to my husband. Bring me back something nice. Not "I love you," not "be safe," just a casual, thoughtless request for a souvenir, as if he were going to the corner store instead of halfway around the world. The plane went down 4 hours into the flight. Mechanical failure, they said later. Catastrophic engine malfunction. It happened fast. No time for distress calls, no time for fear. That's what they told me, as if it was a comfort, as if knowing they didn't suffer made it hurt less. I got the call at 11 p.m. London time, a police officer at my door, her face grave, her words careful and practiced. "Mrs. Samson, I'm very sorry to inform you." The rest was noise, meaningless sounds that my brain couldn't process into anything resembling sense. The weeks after the crash were a blur of bureaucracy and grief. Bodies to identify, or rather belongings to identify because there weren't really bodies, not intact ones, funerals to arrange, insurance paperwork, calls from the airline, from lawyers, from relatives I barely knew who suddenly felt entitled to my pain. Everyone wanted a piece of my grief, as if by witnessing it they could make it mean something. I went through the motions like an automaton. I wore black, I accepted casseroles, I listened to people tell me that time heals, that God had a plan, that they were in a better place. I nodded and thanked them and felt nothing except a vast, echoing emptiness where my family used to be. My friends tried to help. My colleagues at Imperial sent flowers and offered sabbatical leave. My mother flew from California and stayed for 3 weeks, tiptoeing around me like I was made of glass. But eventually, everyone went back to their lives, because that's what people do. They grieve with you for a while, and then they get tired of grieving, and they want you to be normal again so they can stop feeling uncomfortable around your pain. But I couldn't be normal. Normal meant a house with 4 other people in it. Normal meant someone to talk to at breakfast, someone to kiss goodnight, someone to worry about when they came home late. Normal meant a future that included watching my sons graduate, get married, have children. Normal was gone, and I didn't know how to build a new version of it. So instead, I built rituals. I kept their rooms exactly as they'd left them. I paid Marcus's phone bill, even though his number was disconnected. I bought Jamie's favorite cereal every week and let it go stale in the cupboard. I cooked Tom's favorite meals and ate them alone at the dining room table. And every Christmas, I set 5 places and made a feast for ghosts, because stopping felt like abandoning them all over again. Over the years, people noticed my Christmas ritual. My mother called it unhealthy. My therapist called it complicated grief. My few remaining friends stopped inviting me to their holiday celebrations because they knew I'd say no, and eventually they stopped calling it all. But I didn't care what they called it or what they thought. The ritual was mine, and it was the only thing that made me feel close to them, the only day of the year when I could pretend, just for a few hours, that everything was still okay. I knew they weren't coming back. I wasn't delusional. I knew that the empty chairs would stay empty, that the food I prepared would be eaten by me alone or thrown away. But the preparation mattered. The setting of the table, the cooking of their favorite dishes, the lighting of candles. It was a way of saying, you mattered. You still matter. I haven't forgotten you. Except tonight, sitting in the living room with my wine, waiting for a dinner that would never be eaten by anyone but me, I felt something shift, a crack in the careful structure I'd built around my grief, a whisper of doubt that I'd been trying to ignore for months but could no longer silence. What if this wasn't devotion? What if this was cowardice? What if, by setting their places every year, I wasn't honoring them? I was hiding from the fact that they were gone, and I was still here, still alive, still required to figure out how to live in a world that no longer included them. The thought made my hands shake so badly, I had to set down my wine glass before I dropped it. Stay with me. This story is just getting darker. Subscribe now and don't miss the rest of tonight's tale at 10 p.m. I walked upstairs to change for dinner, another part of the ritual, dressing nicely as if this were a real celebration. In my bedroom, I opened the closet to find the green dress I wore every Christmas, the one Tom had always loved. As I reached for it, a box fell from the top shelf, spilling its contents across the floor. Papers. Old papers, cards, letters, things I'd boxed up after the crash and never looked at again because looking meant remembering, and remembering meant drowning. But now they were scattered across the carpet, unavoidable, demanding attention. I knelt down, my knees protesting, and started gathering them. Birthday cards from the boys, a Valentine Tom had made me, ticket stubs from a concert we'd attended. And then a letter in Tom's handwriting, dated 2 weeks before the crash. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. It was addressed to me but never sent, tucked into a book he'd been reading, probably forgotten. I read it once, then again, then a third time, each reading making my chest tighter, my breathing shallower. Dearest Seta, I'm writing this on the plane back from Frankfurt. You were supposed to be with me on this trip, but you canceled for work. Again. I'm not angry. I understand your career matters. But I'm worried. I'm worried that you're going to look back one day and realize you missed our life because you were so focused on building your career. The boys ask about you constantly. When is mom coming home? Why is mom always working? I make excuses, but I'm running out of them. I love you. I love your ambition and your brilliance and your dedication. but I miss you. We all miss you. Please, darling, don't forget to live while you're so busy achieving." The letter fell from my hands, and I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to stop the tears that came anyway, hot and fast and full of a truth I'd been running from for 9 years. I sat on the bedroom floor, surrounded by scattered memories, and finally let myself see it. I'd been doing this long before the crash. The missed soccer games, the forgotten recitals, the dinners where I'd been physically present but mentally absent, responding to emails on my phone while the boys talked about their day, the vacations I'd shortened or skipped entirely because of conference deadlines or research obligations, the way I'd prioritized my PhD over everything else, convinced that my work was too important to pause, that there would be time later for family. Except there hadn't been time later. Later was a plane crash and 4 empty chairs and 9 years of elaborate Christmas dinners for people who couldn't eat them. Tom's letter had been written 2 weeks before the crash, but it could have been written any time in the previous 5 years. The pattern had been clear: me choosing work, them accommodating, the distance growing until it felt normal, until I convinced myself that this was just how academic families functioned. But it wasn't normal. It was me repeating the mistakes I'd blamed on my career, on circumstances, on everything except the real problem. I was afraid of intimacy, afraid of being fully present, afraid of being seen as just a wife and mother instead of Dr. Samson, the brilliant researcher, the accomplished academic, the woman who'd overcome 2 failed marriages to build something important. I'd used my work as armor, and when that armor was stripped away by the crash, I'd replaced it with grief. I'd turned mourning into a full-time occupation, made my loss into an identity, because being the tragic widow was easier than being the woman who'd neglected her family and lost them before she had a chance to make it right. The Christmas dinners weren't about honoring them. They were about punishing myself, about performing the devotion I'd failed to show when it mattered, about maintaining the illusion that I'd been a good wife and mother instead of facing the truth. I went downstairs in my regular clothes, not the green dress. I walked into the dining room and looked at the table I'd spent all day preparing. The turkey, golden and perfect, the sides still warm, the 5 place settings gleaming in the candlelight. I sat down in my usual spot at the far end of the table, Tom's empty chair facing me across the expanse of wood and memories. I picked up my fork, cut a piece of turkey, lifted it to my mouth. I couldn't swallow it. The food turned to ash on my tongue, and I spit it into my napkin, tears streaming down my face. Because suddenly, sitting there alone on Christmas night, I understood the full horror of what I'd been doing. I'd been keeping them dead, not their memory, their death. I'd been maintaining their absence as carefully as I'd once maintained my distance, making sure that nothing changed, nothing healed, nothing moved forward. I'd told myself that the Christmas dinners were about love, but love doesn't demand eternal stasis. Love doesn't require elaborate performances of devotion that nobody sees. Love doesn't mean refusing to heal, because healing feels like betrayal. I'd been sitting at this table for 9 years, and in all that time, I'd never once asked myself what Tom would want me to do, what Marcus, David, and Jamie would want. Because I knew the answer, and the answer was unacceptable. They would want me to live, to move on, to find joy again, to let them go. But letting them go meant facing what I'd done, the time I'd wasted, the presence I'd withheld, the family I'd taken for granted until it was gone. It meant accepting that I couldn't undo my mistakes by setting their places at Christmas dinner. It meant admitting that grief had become my excuse for not engaging with life, just as work had once been my excuse for not engaging with family. I stood up so violently that my chair fell backward, clattering against the hardwood floor. I grabbed Tom's plate and threw it across the room. It shattered against the wall, gravy and turkey sliding down the expensive wallpaper. then Marcus's plate, then David's, then Jamie's, each one hitting the wall with a crash that sounded like thunder, like my chest splitting open, like 9 years of pretending finally breaking apart. When all 4 plates were destroyed, I collapsed onto the floor, surrounded by shards of china and ruined food and the wreckage of my carefully maintained illusion. "I'm sorry," I sobbed to the empty room. "I'm so sorry. I wasn't there. I wasn't there when it mattered, and I can't fix it by cooking your favorite foods. I can't fix it at all." The house was silent except for my crying. Nobody answered, because nobody was there. They'd never been there. Not for 9 years, not at any of these elaborate dinners I'd prepared. I'd been apologizing to ghosts and calling it grief, but really, it was just another way of avoiding the living. I thought about my mother, alone in California, who'd called last week to invite me for Christmas, and whom I'd turned down because of my ritual. I thought about my colleagues at Imperial, who'd stopped inviting me to departmental gatherings because I always said no. I thought about the PhD students I'd mentored, who'd tried to stay in touch after they graduated, and whom I'd slowly ghosted because letting them close felt dangerous. I'd lost my family in a plane crash, but I'd lost myself long before that, first to ambition, then to grief, always to something that let me hide from the terrifying vulnerability of being fully present with other people. Tom's letter had asked me not to miss our life, but I'd missed it anyway, and when it was over, I'd kept missing life by refusing to build a new one. I don't know how long I sat on that floor, long enough for the candles to burn down, long enough for the food to go cold, long enough for something fundamental to shift inside me, like tectonic plates realigning after an earthquake. Finally, I stood up. My body ached. 62-year-old knees don't appreciate sitting on hard floors, but I made myself stand, made myself look at the destruction I'd caused. Broken plates, spilled food, the perfect Christmas dinner turned into chaos. It was the most honest thing I'd done in 9 years. I walked to the hutch and took out 4 photos, one of Tom, one of each of the boys. I carried them to the mantel and arranged them carefully. Then I went back to the table and, one by one, removed their place settings. I folded their napkins, stacked their silverware, carried away their glasses. I left only my own place, my own single setting at the table. When I was done, I looked at the table and felt, for the first time in 9 years, something that wasn't grief or guilt or hollow ritual. I felt space, room to breathe, permission to be alive despite the dead. I picked up my phone and called my mother. It was 3 in the afternoon in California, and she answered on the second ring. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking, "I know it's late, but if the invitation still stands, I'd like to come for New Year's. I'd like to try to be present for a change." There was a long pause. Then my mother, who'd watched me bury myself in grief for 9 years and never pushed, never demanded, only waited, said very quietly, "I'd love that, sweetheart. I'd love that so much." After I hung up, I cleaned. Not the careful, ritualized cleaning of my Christmas preparations, but desperate, necessary destruction. I throw away the remaining food, all of it, every carefully prepared dish. I packed up the good china, the silver, the crystal glasses. I took down the Christmas decorations that had hung in the same places for 9 years. I went upstairs to the boys' rooms, Marcus's with his rowing trophies, David's with his philosophy books, Jamie's with his collection of Lego sets, and I started sorting, not throwing everything away, but choosing. One trophy to keep, one book, one Lego set. The rest could be donated, given to families with living children who could use them. Tom's office was harder. His desk still had papers on it. His coffee mug still sat beside his keyboard as if he'd just stepped away for a moment. I touched each item, said a silent goodbye, and packed it into boxes. not to erase him, but to stop trying to preserve a moment that was gone. It took all night. By dawn on December 26th, my house looked different. Emptier, but not empty. Sad, but not suffocating. The photos remained on the mantle, but the shrine was gone. The memories remained, but the performance had ended. I stood in the living room as gray morning light filtered through the windows and felt exhausted and raw, and underneath it all, something I hadn't felt in 9 years: relief. The relief of finally putting down a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was heavy. I'd spent 9 years trying to keep my family alive by refusing to let them go. But keeping someone alive in your heart doesn't require elaborate rituals or Christmas dinners for ghosts. It requires honoring what they wanted for you, which was always simply for you to live. I made coffee, just 1 cup in an ordinary mug, and sat at my newly stripped dining table. 1 place setting, 1 chair, 1 woman, alive despite everything, finally willing to admit it. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. "Booked you a flight for the 29th. Can't wait to see you. Love you." I typed back, "Love you too. Thank you for waiting for me." Then I opened my laptop and looked at the email I'd been ignoring for 3 months, an invitation to present my research at a conference in March, to engage with my field again, to remember that I was more than grief and guilt. I'd been declining these invitations for years, using the anniversary of the crash, the boys' birthdays, every possible date as an excuse to say no. This time, I clicked accept. The house felt strange around me, emptier but somehow less lonely. For 9 years, I'd filled it with ghosts and called it family. Now, it was just me, and that was terrifying, but it was also true. I was alive. They were not. No amount of ritual would change that, but I could choose how I lived with it. I thought about Tom's letter, his plea for me not to miss our life. I'd missed it anyway, but maybe I could stop missing the life I had left. Not forgetting them, I would never forget them, but letting them be past instead of present, memory instead of performance, love instead of obligation. There would be no Christmas dinner next year, no place settings for ghosts, no elaborate feast for people who couldn't eat it. Instead, maybe I'd visit my mother. Maybe I'd have dinner with colleagues. Maybe I'd simply be alone, and okay with that, because being alone wasn't the same as being haunted. I finished my coffee and looked at the empty chairs around the table. This time, I didn't see them as needing to be filled. I saw them as space for new people, new experiences, new possibilities, or space for nothing, which was also fine, because emptiness isn't the same as grief when you finally stop trying to fill it with ghosts. Some rituals honor the dead. Others trap the living. For 9 years, I couldn't tell the difference. Now I know. The greatest act of love isn't preserving someone's place at the table. It's accepting their absence so completely that you can finally start living in your own presence. If this story touched you, stay with me for the next one. Subscribe, like, share it with someone who would feel it, and leave your thoughts in the comments. My 10 p.m. stories, one story every night at 10 p.m.